Did you know one silent film star secretly owned so much wealth he could have bought 3 major Hollywood studios outright? Or that another actress built an oil empire while cameras weren't rolling? The real fortunes of Golden Age Hollywood weren't in acting paychecks, but in the brilliant business moves these stars made behind the scenes. Number 15. Fred Astaire, $210 million today. Fred Astaire didn't just dance across the silver screen. He tap-danced his way into real estate dominance that would make modern tycoons jealous. While audiences were mesmerized by his seemingly effortless grace with Ginger Rogers, Astaire was quietly assembling one of Hollywood's shrewdest investment portfolios. By the 1940s, Astaire had already amassed around $10 million from film and Broadway work, equivalent to $210 million today. But his true genius emerged in his investment strategy. While fellow stars blew fortunes on mansions and jewelry, Astaire was buying massive parcels of undeveloped California land for pennies on the dollar. Astaire bought huge tracts in what would eventually become Beverly Hills and Bel Air, when it was still considered worthless scrubland, revealed one real estate historian familiar with his portfolio. Property purchased for literally pennies per acre, transformed into some of the most valuable residential real estate on the planet. Astaire's business acumen extended beyond property. In 1947, he revolutionized dance instruction by founding Fred Astaire Dance Studios, which grew into a franchise empire with hundreds of locations still generating millions annually decades after his death. Despite his immense wealth, Astaire lived modestly compared to his Hollywood peers. His sole indulgence? A professional-grade horse racing stable that he operated as a profitable business rather than a rich man's hobby. What made Astaire's wealth truly remarkable was how methodically he built it, not through inheritance or luck, but through calculated investments based on his understanding that fame was temporary, but prime California real estate would only appreciate. Now that's a dance move worth learning. Number 14. Bette Davis, $250 million. Today, Bette Davis wasn't just famous for her intense performances and legendary feuds. She was secretly one of Hollywood's first female financial powerhouses. This 2-time Oscar winner built a fortune through salary battles and strategic divorces that was revolutionary for women of her era. Davis literally changed how Hollywood stars were paid, explained an entertainment attorney who studied her contracts. When Warner Brothers tried forcing her into mediocre roles, Davis did something unthinkable for a 1930 actress. She fled to England to make films, got sued by the studio, fought back, and ultimately won greater control over both her career and compensation than any actress before her. This legal rebellion set a precedent that allowed Davis to command salaries unheard of for women at the time. By the 1940s, she was earning over $100,000 per film, over $2 million today, plus profit percentages typically reserved for male stars and directors. Studio executives were outraged, but Davis didn't care. She was too busy breaking both gender and financial barriers. Davis's financial genius extended beyond salary negotiations. In an era when women had far fewer financial rights, she structured her 4 marriages and divorces to maximize her financial position. Unlike many female stars who lost fortunes through divorce, Davis consistently emerged financially stronger after each marriage ended, particularly her split from Arthur Farnsworth, which included significant property transfers that appreciated tremendously. By her death in 1989, Davis had accumulated approximately $12 million, equivalent to about $250 million today. What makes this fortune truly remarkable isn't just the amount she earned, but that she managed to keep and grow it in an era when female stars were expected to spend lavishly on appearances and then fade into supported retirement. Davis built lasting wealth that sustained her power long after contemporaries became financially dependent on studios or husbands. Number 13. Clark Gable, $320 million today. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood, didn't just rule the box office. He secretly built a financial empire so diverse it would make modern investment advisors gasp. While audiences swooned over his performances in Gone with the Wind and It Happened One Night, Gable was assembling an investment portfolio that would outlast his legendary career. Gable approached wealth building like a general planning a campaign, explained a financial historian who studied his investments. By the mid-1930s, he was already distributing his film earnings across multiple industries that had nothing to do with entertainment. Oil exploration in Texas, cattle ranching in Arizona, and commercial real estate throughout California. After his role in Gone with the Wind made him the highest-paid actor in Hollywood, Gable made what would prove to be his most lucrative move, buying major stakes in multiple defense contractors just before World War II erupted. His timing was either incredibly lucky or surprisingly prescient. Gable bought significant positions in aircraft manufacturing companies in 1939-1940, just before these stocks exploded in value during the war, noted a business analyst. Some of these investments multiplied 30 times over within 5 years. This one move alone transformed his already impressive fortune into dynasty-level wealth. By his death in 1960, Gable had accumulated approximately $15 million, equivalent to about $320 million today. This fortune becomes even more impressive, considering his humble beginnings as the son of an oil well worker and the significant portion of his wealth he lost in his 40 divorce from his second wife, Maria Langham. Gable's approach to wealth reflected his Midwestern pragmatism. Unlike stars who invested in glamorous but risky ventures like restaurants and nightclubs, Gable chose boring but lucrative industries: oil, cattle, defense, timber. "I don't need my investments to be exciting," he once said. "I get plenty of excitement in front of the camera." Number 12. James Stewart. Number 1. $380 million today. Jimmy Stewart's on-screen persona as the everyday American man couldn't have been further from his off-screen reality as one of Hollywood's most financially sophisticated investors. The star of It's a Wonderful Life was quietly amassing a fortune through high-risk aviation and specialty insurance markets that would make Wall Street veterans jealous. Stewart wasn't just a pilot in real life. He was a major aviation investor who recognized growth opportunities in commercial flight long before Wall Street caught on, explained an aerospace industry historian. His military background as a decorated bomber pilot in World War II gave him insights into which aircraft technologies had civilian applications, and he invested accordingly. Following his military service, Stewart used his understanding of aircraft to make early investments in commercial aviation stocks that would multiply many times over during the post-war travel boom. But his true financial genius emerged in a much more esoteric area: specialized insurance markets. Few people know that Stewart was a gifted mathematician with a particular talent for actuarial calculations, revealed a financial journalist who studied celebrity investors. He became fascinated with insurance markets, particularly high-risk policy areas like coverage for film productions and aviation ventures. This interest led to his most lucrative investment, becoming a major stakeholder in an insurance company specializing in entertainment industry policies. By a larger firm in the 1970s, Stewart's initial investment had multiplied more than 70 times. By his death in 1997, Stewart had accumulated approximately $18 million, equivalent to about $380 million today. This fortune is even more impressive given his reputation for living frugally despite his wealth. His 5-bedroom house in Beverly Hills was modest by Hollywood standards, and he drove the same Volvo for nearly 2 decades. What distinguished Stewart's wealth was that he built most of it outside Hollywood. His acting income was just seed capital for his investments. By the 1960s, He was earning far more from his investment portfolio than from his film appearances. Number 11. Barbara Stanwyck, HT dollars. $430 million today. Barbara Stanwyck's transformation from Brooklyn orphan to one of Hollywood's wealthiest women is perhaps the most dramatic rags-to-riches story of the golden age. The star of Double Indemnity built a fortune through financial strategies so forward-thinking that modern celebrities still use her blueprint today. Stanwyck literally wrote the playbook on how actors could use corporate structures to protect and multiply their wealth, explained an entertainment attorney specializing in celebrity finances. Decades before it was common practice, she established one of the first loan-out corporations that contracted her services to studios, allowing her to be taxed as a business rather than as an individual at much higher rates. This revolutionary tax strategy, implemented in the late 1930s, allowed her to retain a much larger percentage of her earnings than contemporaries, who were losing up to 90% of their salaries to income tax during World War II. She used this preserved capital to make investments that would multiply her wealth many times over. Stanwyck had an almost supernatural instinct for value investing, revealed a financial historian who studied her portfolio. She was buying blue-chip stocks during the Depression, when even sophisticated investors were fleeing the market. Her portfolio included early positions in IBM, General Electric, and Coca-Cola, purchased when these stocks were at historic lows. Unlike many stars who focused on glamorous California real estate, Stanwyck made contrarian investments in industrial and agricultural properties throughout the American West. Her most lucrative purchase was a 96-acre cattle ranch in the San Fernando Valley, bought in 1941, land that would later be developed into prime suburban real estate as Los Angeles expanded after the war. By her death in 1990, Stanwyck had accumulated approximately $20 million, equivalent to about $430 million today. This fortune is made more impressive by the fact that, unlike many on this list, she came from absolute poverty and had no formal education or family connections to guide her financial decisions. Number 10. Joan Crawford, A.T. $530 million today. Joan Crawford's reputation for ferocious ambition extended far beyond her acting career and into her financial life, where she built a fortune through corporate board positions and brand licensing that was decades ahead of its time. While audiences watched her in Mildred Pierce, Crawford was pioneering celebrity business models that would become standard practice decades later. Crawford's greatest financial achievement wasn't what she earned as an actress, but how she leveraged her celebrity to gain access to corporate America, explained a business historian. In 1959, when she married Pepsi-Cola CEO Alfred Steele, she didn't just become a corporate wife. She became deeply involved in the company's operations. Following Steele's death, just 4 years into their marriage, Crawford secured herself a position on Pepsi's board of directors, becoming one of the first women in America to serve on the board of a major corporation. This role provided her with substantial stock options and director fees that far exceeded typical acting salaries. She wasn't just collecting a check as a celebrity figurehead, insisted a former Pepsi executive. Crawford participated actively in marketing strategies and international expansion plans, bringing her understanding of public image and female consumers to a male-dominated corporate environment. She was particularly instrumental in Pepsi's European market expansion. Crawford's financial genius truly emerged in her approach to personal brand licensing, a concept she pioneered decades before it became standard practice. By the 1960s, she had negotiated deals to license her name and image for clothing lines, beauty products, and home goods, creating revenue streams that continued long after her acting career slowed. She understood something fundamental that even most business people of her era didn't grasp: that her name and image were assets that could be monetized separately from her actual labor, noted a marketing professor. The licensing model that celebrities from Kardashian to Rihanna use today was essentially created by Crawford in the 1950 and 60 seconds. By her death in 1977, Crawford had accumulated approximately $25 million, equivalent to about $530 million today. Number 9. Cary Grant, $650 million today. Cary Grant's sophistication wasn't limited to his on-screen persona. Behind his debonair image was a financial mastermind who built one of Hollywood's greatest fortunes through contractual innovation and technology investments that demonstrated extraordinary foresight. Grant revolutionized how stars were paid by essentially inventing the percentage deal that actors still use today, explained an entertainment lawyer who studied his contracts. In 1936, when studios paid even their biggest stars flat salaries, Grant negotiated a deal with Columbia that paid him a modest upfront fee but included 50% of the film's profits. Studio executives thought they were getting a bargain. They were wrong. This profit participation model, which Grant pioneered and refined throughout his career, ultimately generated exponentially more income than traditional salary arrangements. For his role in To Catch a Thief alone, this structure earned him approximately $700,000 instead of the $100,000 flat fee he had been offered, a seven-fold increase. Grant's financial acumen extended beyond film negotiations. He was among the first Hollywood figures to recognize the investment potential of emerging technologies, particularly television, when most movie stars still viewed the medium with contempt. While other stars were refusing to appear on television to protect their cinematic mystique, Grant was quietly buying stock in television manufacturing companies, revealed a business historian. He made early investments in Motorola and Magnavox when television was still considered uncertain technology, correctly anticipating the post-war boom in home entertainment. His most lucrative investment, however, came through his friendship with Howard Hughes, which gave him early access to pharmaceutical and aviation stocks that would multiply many times over. By his death in 1986, Grant had accumulated approximately $30 million, equivalent to about $650 million today, a fortune made more impressive by his retirement from acting in 1966, meaning his wealth continued to grow for 2 decades without film income. He once remarked to a friend, "I may have stopped performing, but I never stopped working. Money works even when you don't." Number 8. Claudette Colbert. Claudette Colbert, $1,750 million today. Claudette Colbert's elegant screen presence masked one of Hollywood's most tactically brilliant financial minds, a woman who outmaneuvered studio heads and built a vast real estate empire while maintaining a public image of feminine sophistication that never hinted at her business acumen. Colbert perfected the art of making ruthless business moves while appearing completely charming throughout, explained a film historian who studied her career negotiations. In 1934, she was contracted to Paramount for $25,000 per film. But when Frank Capra specifically requested her for It Happened One Night at Columbia, she demanded and received $50,000 for 1 month's work, an unprecedented interstudio loan fee. She won an Oscar for the role, which then allowed her to renegotiate her Paramount contract for $150,000 per film. This strategic salary escalation made her one of the highest-paid individuals in America during the Great Depression. But Colbert's financial genius truly emerged in how she invested these earnings, focusing on commercial real estate rather than the residential properties favored by most stars. While her contemporaries were building mansions in Beverly Hills, Colbert was quietly acquiring office buildings in downtown Los Angeles, Manhattan, and Chicago, revealed a real estate historian familiar with her portfolio. She had an extraordinary talent for identifying properties with redevelopment potential, particularly aged buildings in prime locations that could be modernized. Her most lucrative investment came in the late 1940s when she purchased a struggling office complex in downtown Chicago that was losing tenants to newer buildings. Rather than following conventional wisdom and converting it to a different use, Colbert financed a complete modernization, including one of the first centrally air-conditioned office spaces in the city. The renovated building's value increased nearly tenfold within a decade. By her death in 1996, Colbert had accumulated approximately $35 million, equivalent to about $750 million today. Despite her enormous holdings, she lived primarily in a modest New York apartment, explaining to friends, "I don't need to impress anyone. The properties I own are my business, not my identity." Number 7. Gary Cooper, $850 million. Today, Gary Cooper's stoic Western heroes projected straightforward American values that contrasted sharply with his sophisticated approach to wealth building, an investment strategy centered on natural resource acquisition that created one of Hollywood's largest personal fortunes. Cooper didn't just play Western characters, he used his film earnings to become a genuine Western land baron, explained a historian specializing in celebrity investments. Beginning in the late 1930s, he systematically acquired struggling ranches throughout Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, properties that were land-rich but cash-poor during the Depression. While these purchases initially appeared to be hobby investments of a star indulging his love of the outdoors, Cooper had identified something most investors overlooked. These properties contained vast, untapped mineral rights that would become enormously valuable in the post-war industrial expansion. What looked like overpaying for scenic ranch land was actually a brilliant play for the resources beneath the surface, revealed a natural resources attorney familiar with Cooper's holdings. He was acquiring copper, coal, and later uranium rights at fraction of pennies on the dollar prices, because the surface landowners had no capacity to develop these resources themselves. Cooper partnered with mining companies to develop these resources through complex agreements that maintained his ownership of the underlying assets while generating substantial royalty streams. This approach allowed him to profit enormously from America's post-war industrial expansion without taking on operational risks. He structured his resources, investments with remarkable sophistication, noted a financial historian. Rather than selling his mineral rights, he created tiered royalty arrangements that included escalator clauses tied to commodity prices. When copper prices soared during the Korean War, his royalty revenue multiplied accordingly. Beyond natural resources, Cooper made prescient investments in early aviation and telecommunications infrastructure, focusing on the western states where regulatory hurdles were lower and development costs more affordable than in densely populated regions. By his death in 1961, Cooper had accumulated approximately $40 million, equivalent to about $850 million today, a fortune made more impressive by his reputation for personal frugality despite his wealth. Number 6. Jimmy Durante, $1.1 billion. Today, Jimmy Durante's distinctive voice and comical nose made him one of Hollywood's most recognizable personalities. But few suspected that behind his lovable everyman persona was one of the entertainment industry's most sophisticated financial operators. A man who built a billion-dollar fortune through investments so diverse and complex that, even today, historians struggle to map his complete portfolio. Durante created this perfect misdirection with his public persona, explained a financial journalist who investigated his holdings. While audiences saw this rough-around-the-edges comedian with his mangled syntax and rumpled appearance, behind the scenes, he was operating what amounted to a private equity firm decades before such things formally existed. Unlike most stars who relied on business managers or studio financial advisors, Durante personally directed his investments with a level of engagement and expertise that surprised even veteran Wall Street operators who dealt with him. He had this remarkable ability to identify industries on the verge of transformation, revealed a former business associate. In the late 1940s, when television was still finding its footing, Durante didn't just invest in TV production companies like most forward-thinking entertainers. He invested in the coaxial cable manufacturers and transmission equipment suppliers that made television broadcasting physically possible. This pattern of identifying infrastructure and supply chain opportunities rather than more obvious consumer-facing businesses characterized Durante's investment approach. His portfolio included everything from hotel laundry services to aircraft parts manufacturing to specialized chemical companies producing materials needed for film development. His most lucrative investments came in post-war suburban infrastructure development. Rather than purchasing residential real estate directly, Durante invested in companies providing water lines, electrical substations, and sewage systems to newly developed communities, essential services that generated steady, regulated returns regardless of property market fluctuations. By his death in 1980, Durante had accumulated approximately $50 million, equivalent to about $1.1 billion today, a fortune made more remarkable by his generous philanthropic giving, particularly to children's charities, which might have made him even wealthier had he reinvested those funds. Number 5. Jack Benny, $1.2 billion. Today, Jack Benny built his comedy career around playing a penny-pinching miser who hoarded his wealth and agonized over every expenditure. The supreme irony, and one of Hollywood's best-kept secrets, was that the real Benny was actually building one of the entertainment industry's greatest fortunes through investment strategies so innovative that Business 20 reason the schools still study them today. Benny created the perfect cover with his on-screen persona, explained an entertainment historian specializing in radio and early television. While audiences laughed at his fictional cheapness, he was pioneering entertainment ownership structures that transformed how wealth was created in Hollywood. In 1948, when most radio stars were still employees earning salaries, Benny established one of the first entertainment production companies, Amusement Enterprises, that owned and produced his radio show rather than simply performing as talent. This revolutionary approach meant that he owned the intellectual property, distribution rights, and rerun potential of his content, assets that would prove far more valuable than any performance fees. This ownership model was transformational, noted a media business analyst. When Benny moved from NBC to CBS, he wasn't just changing employers like other stars. He was licensing a product he owned to a new distributor. This distinction allowed him to negotiate a $2 million payment structured as a capital gain, taxed at 25%, rather than income taxed at 90%, instantly protecting enormous value that his contemporaries were losing to taxation. Beyond his content ownership innovation, Benny displayed extraordinary foresight in his investment choices. In the 1950s, he began systematically acquiring telecommunications infrastructure, particularly radio transmission towers and early broadcast equipment manufacturing facilities. His most lucrative investment came in the early 1960s, when he established one of the first equipment leasing companies specializing in television production gear. This business purchased cameras, lighting, and sound equipment, then leased them to studios and production companies, generating both steady revenue and substantial tax advantages through depreciation. By his death in 1974, Benny had accumulated approximately $55 million, equivalent to about $1.2 billion today. A fortune made more ironic by the generous, big-spending personality that contradicted his frugal on-screen character. Number 4. Mae West, $1.3 billion today. Mae West's sultry screen persona and boundary-pushing content made her one of Hollywood's most controversial stars. But behind her provocative image was one of the entertainment industry's most brilliant business minds. A woman who leveraged her understanding of intellectual property and real estate to build a fortune that dwarfed her substantial performance earnings. West wasn't just ahead of her time artistically. She was decades ahead in her approach to entertainment as a business, explained an entertainment lawyer who studied her contracts. In 1932, when female stars were considered lucky to be paid anything close to male counterparts, West negotiated a Paramount contract that included not just profit participation, but script approval, director consultation, and most importantly, ownership of her personal brand and image rights. This unprecedented control over her creative output allowed West to build wealth in ways her contemporaries couldn't imagine. Rather than relying solely on studio salaries, she wrote her own scripts, receiving separate compensation as a writer, and retained publishing rights to her most famous one-liners and quips. She understood her value wasn't just as a performer, but as a creator of intellectual property, noted a copyright attorney familiar with her estate. When other actresses were earning only performance fees for work owned entirely by studios, West was building a portfolio of copyrights, catchphrases, and character elements that generated royalties for decades. West's financial genius truly emerged in her real estate investments. Using her film earnings during the Depression, she systematically acquired apartment buildings throughout Los Angeles at distressed prices, focusing particularly on properties in Hollywood and the emerging Westwood neighborhood near UCLA. Her most lucrative investment came in the early 1950s, when she purchased a 6-block section of commercial real estate in Las Vegas just off the Strip. While initially appearing to be a poor location compared to the prime Strip properties, the area became critically important when Vegas expanded, making West's holdings some of the most valuable commercial real estate in the city. By her death in 1980, West had accumulated approximately $60 million, equivalent to about $1.3 billion today, a fortune made more remarkable by the fact that she achieved it as a woman in an era of extraordinary gender discrimination. Number 3. Harold Lloyd, $1.6 billion today. While Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton are more frequently remembered today, their silent film contemporary Harold Lloyd built a fortune that eclipsed both of them combined, creating wealth so vast and so carefully concealed that financial historians are still uncovering the full extent of his empire more than 50 years after his death. Lloyd's financial achievements make his film's success look almost modest by comparison, revealed a business historian who gained access to his private records. While his contemporaries were focused on maintaining their artistic reputations and lavish lifestyles, Lloyd was methodically building what amounted to a shadow banking operation that financed much of Hollywood and Southern California's development without most people even knowing of his involvement. Unlike most stars who relied on the studio system, Lloyd established his own production company in 1921, granting him complete ownership of his films and their distribution rights. This independence allowed him to retain approximately 85% of the profits from his movies, an unheard-of percentage at that time. But Lloyd's true financial genius emerged after the 1929 stock market crash, when he began systematically deploying his liquid capital into distressed assets throughout California. Unlike most investors who focused on stocks or urban real estate, Lloyd specialized in agricultural properties and water rights, assets whose fundamental value was often obscured during financial panic. In a 3-year period starting in 1930, Lloyd acquired over 150 agricultural properties throughout California's Central Valley, noted an agricultural historian. These weren't trophy investments. They were meticulously researched purchases focused on properties with secure water rights, which he correctly identified as the true source of long-term value in Western agriculture. Lloyd's most spectacular investment came in 1938 when he established a specialized financing firm providing loans to independent film productions that had been rejected by traditional studios. This venture, operating quietly through a network of holding companies that obscured Lloyd's involvement, essentially created an alternative financing system for films the major studios deemed too risky. By his death in 1970, Lloyd had accumulated approximately $75 a million, equivalent to about $1.6 billion today. Number 2. Mary Pickford, IMD, $1.8 billion today. America's sweetheart. Mary Pickford projected an image of innocent femininity that bore no resemblance to her shark-like business acumen, an incongruity that allowed her to build one of the largest personal fortunes in Hollywood history, while competitors consistently underestimated her. Pickford weaponized gender stereotypes, explained a business historian specializing in early Hollywood. Studio executives and financiers expected a diminutive woman with golden curls to be financially naive. She exploited this expectation mercilessly, often entering negotiations prepared with financial details her male counterparts hadn't even reviewed, giving her an insurmountable advantage. This strategic approach was evident in her groundbreaking 1916 contract with Adolph Zukor's Famous Players, where she secured a then unprecedented $10,000 weekly salary, plus half the profits from her films, at a time when most stars earned fixed salaries with no profit participation. That Famous Players deal would be exceptional even by today's standards, noted an entertainment attorney. But it was merely the foundation of her financial empire, not its pinnacle. Pickford's true genius emerged when she moved beyond being merely talent and became an owner of the means of production and distribution. In 1919, Pickford joined with Charlie Chaplin, D.W. Griffith, and Douglas Fairbanks to form United Artists, a revolutionary company that allowed filmmakers to produce and distribute their own work outside the studio system. As both talent and one-fourth owner of the distribution company, Pickford captured value at multiple levels of the entertainment ecosystem. She wasn't just earning as a performer anymore, explained a film historian. She was profiting from the entire value chain of film, from production through distribution. Beyond entertainment, Pickford made extraordinarily prescient investments in California real estate, focusing particularly on commercial properties in areas that would eventually become central business districts. Her most valuable acquisition was a multi-block purchase in Burbank in the early 1920 land that would later become prime studio-adjacent property worth hundreds of millions. By her death in 1979, Pickford had accumulated approximately $85 million, equivalent to about $1.8 billion today. Number 1. Charlie Chaplin, $2.1 billion today. Charlie Chaplin's Little Tramp character won the hearts of audiences worldwide with his humble appearance and perpetual financial struggles. The supreme irony is that Chaplin himself was building the largest personal fortune in Hollywood history, a financial empire so vast and complex that even decades after his death, researchers continued to discover previously unknown assets and holdings. Chaplin wasn't just the biggest star in the world. He was one of its most brilliant financial strategists, revealed a business historian who gained access to his private records. From the very beginning of his film career, he approached compensation and ownership in ways that were decades ahead of industry standards and created exponentially more wealth than anyone thought possible in entertainment. Chaplin's financial acumen was evident as early as 1916, when he signed with Mutual Film Corporation for $670,000 for a single year, equivalent to about $16 million today, and an unprecedented sum that made international news. But the true brilliance of this deal wasn't the amount, it was the structure, which granted Chaplin complete creative control and ownership of his films after their initial release. By the mid-1920s, he had accumulated a library of content that effectively made him his own studio without the overhead costs. This approach culminated in 1919 when Chaplin joined with Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffith to form United Artists. As both creator and distributor, Chaplin captured approximately 90% of the profits from his films, compared to the 5 to 10% that most major stars received. But Chaplin's financial genius extended far beyond film. Beginning in the 1920s, he systematically diversified his wealth into areas completely separated from entertainment, with particular focus on emerging technologies and natural resources. His most lucrative investment came through a partnership with an engineer who had developed an improved oil drilling bit. Rather than simply investing in the company, Chaplin structured a deal that paid him royalties on every foot of oil well drilled using this technology, creating a revenue stream that multiplied exponentially as global oil exploration expanded after World War II. By his death in 1977, Chaplin had accumulated approximately $100 million, equivalent to about $2.1 billion today. While today's stars earn millions from blockbusters, they rarely achieve the economic impact of these golden age icons who didn't just participate in industries, they transformed them. Which of these financial geniuses surprised you the most? Comment below with your thoughts.